I have been receiving quite a few requests to do a psychological horror story lately, so I decided to look up some prompts on Reddit or writing prompts to find some inspiration, and this was the best one. If you would like to request your own story, please use the form in the pinned comment or in the description down below. Also, please subscribe if you haven't yet so you don't miss any of my new stories. I would love to hit a milestone before the end of the year. Also, thank you to all of my supporters for supporting me. Let's get started. The Shining by ChatGPT psychological horror style. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I'd heard the stories whispers about things moving on their own, strange voices in the dark, but that changed the winter I took the job as the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel. They warned me it was isolated, that the snow cut it off for months at a time. Perfect, I thought. Peace, quiet, time to write again, time to fix things with Wendy and Danny. We needed this, or so I told myself. The first weeks were perfect. Snow muffled every sound, and the hotel's endless corridors creaked with an unsettling rhythm. Wendy cooked, read to Danny, and I wrote, or at least pretended to. But something felt awful. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was oppressive, heavy. It started small, a cold spot in the hallway that never warmed. Footsteps overhead when no one was up there. Danny spoke less and less, muttering to his invisible friend, Tony, who now told him things. Things no 6-year-old should know. One night I woke up at 2:17 a.m., sharp heart pounding, skin slick with sweat. I heard the elevator running. No one had touched it in days. When I went to check, there was nothing. Just the echo of my own breath bouncing back at me. Wendy dismissed it, said it was just the wind. But the Overlook had no wind inside, only shadows that moved when they shouldn't. Danny changed first. He drew things, rooms drenched in blood, faceless figures watching him from doorways. They live here, Daddy, he whispered once, eyes vacant. They want you. I started seeing things, too, shapes reflected in the mirrors that weren't there when I turned around, whispers from behind the walls. Once I found typewritten pages I didn't remember writing, or work, and no play makes Jack a dull boy, over and over hundreds of times. My name is not Jack. I tried to confront Wendy. She cried, said I was scaring her, that my eyes weren't right anymore, that I'd started sleepwalking, muttering in a strange voice. I couldn't remember. The hotel fed on us. I felt it like it knew our fears, our regrets. I started dreaming of a man in a tuxedo, his smile too wide, who invited me to a ballroom filled with the dead. They danced in silence, their eyes fixed on me. I found an old photograph in the basement, yelled and cracked. It was dated July 4th, 1921. My face stared back at me from the crowd. That night I tried to leave, but the front doors wouldn't open. The snow was piled too high, and every phone line was dead. The radio, static. Wendy locked herself and Danny in the pantry. She said she didn't trust me anymore. I didn't blame her. I didn't trust myself either. The hotel whispered now constantly. Promises, threats, sweet nothings in a voice like mine, but older, darker. On the final night, I saw Danny in the hallway, staring into room 237. The door opened slowly, though no one touched it. I reached for him, but the walls stretched and warped. The carpet squirmed beneath my feet. The lights flickered. I heard screaming, maybe mine. When I woke, the sun had returned, melting the snow. The rescue team said they found me alone. No Wendy, no Danny, just me, muttering about ballroom ghosts and mirrors that breathe. I still dream of the Overlook, still see the shadows in the corner of my eye. I try not to look too closely at my reflection. It smiles when I don't. I never believed in ghosts, not until I became one. So what do you think? If you've read any Stephen King books or seen any of the movie adaptations, you've probably noticed some similarities to The Shining. I actually didn't realize how similar it was while I was writing it, but it's definitely a very shining story. Sometimes ChatGPT comes out with some really good stuff, doesn't it? This story had me on edge. Let's take a look at some of these sentences that it came up with. There was one particular part where I had to double-check that ChatGPT had written the whole thing itself, because this part is just pure nightmare fuel. That night I dreamt of a man in a tuxedo, his smile too wide, who invited me to a ballroom filled with the dead. They danced in silence, their eyes fixed on me. Just what a terrifying image. This entire story is basically like a descent into madness. You can feel the character slowly losing his grip on reality as the story progresses, which is what makes it such a good psychological horror story. This story also taught me something interesting about how language works. Since ChatGPT knows that most people are afraid of the dark, it used darkness as a motif to build suspense. For example, the story says things like the dark instead of the night, or it was dark outside. Basically, it uses the word dark as a synonym for night to make it scarier. Because when you think of dark, you automatically think of nighttime, which means that you're more likely to imagine scary things happening. I don't know why we do that. Maybe it's just human nature to be afraid of the dark. But it's interesting to see how language can be used to evoke emotions. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this story. Please let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. And of course, if you want to support me, please consider becoming a member or buying me a coffee. I'll put the links in the description down below. Thank you so much for listening. and I'll see you next time. Bye.